Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. In today's video, we are going to be talking about how to get your FIRE number, what that means, what that entails, all of the things. So if that is of interest to you, then please keep watching. Okay, so let's talk about FIRE. What is FIRE? What's a FIRE number? What is this stuff? Financial Independence, Retire Early. That is what FIRE stands for. FIRE is an acronym for Financial Independence, Retire Early. Well, what is financial independence? Having enough money to live off of for the rest of your life and not having to rely on anyone else's income. So not an employer's income, not somebody else paying your bills, just having enough money in your own possession to live off of for the rest of your life without having to work or rely on others to get your needs met. So I'd like to think that there are a lot of ways to pursue FIRE, or a lot of ways that people can actually become financially independent. However, most of us will have to go the difficult route. So unless you're going to win the lottery, come up on a large lump sum of money, some inheritance, a settlement, or something like that, you're going to have to go the tough route, which is saving, aka investing. Saving in the form of investing. Obviously, there are a number of ways to save, but we're not talking about putting money in your regular bank account and saving it that way, because that's not going to get the job done. We're talking about investing and growing your money and having your money to actually work for you instead of you having to work for your money. Now, my husband and I are on track currently for an early retirement of around age 50, but honestly, I would like to bump that up as much as we possibly can. We actually just left a meeting with our financial advisor today. We're still on track for about 50 years old, but we kind of talked about what we could do to kind of bump up that number to closer to 40. I did do a video already in the, I guess what I'm calling part 1 or episode 1 of this Pursuing FIRE series, so I'll have it linked up above if you want to check it out. But today we're going to be talking about just one way to calculate your FIRE number, what that means, and then also some things to take into consideration, or not really to take into consideration for other people, although it's helpful, but really just things that we have to take into consideration if we do attempt to retire in 10 years. There are actually a number of calculators and formulas, but there is a general rule of thumb, which you've probably heard about. There's actually like a rule of thumb, and then also just kind of like a friendly suggestion. So a lot of experts and financial experts will recommend having $1 million, and they suggest that that would be enough for you to live off of for the rest of your life. And I would say that that's probably pretty accurate, because even when we use the formula or equation that I'm about to share, the number is pretty much the same. And I would say that, just speaking from a person who has never had $1 million and whose spending habits aren't super high and lavish, I would say we probably could live off of $1 million if we retired at like 40, 45, or somewhere up and through there. I don't think retiring at 30 with $1 million would probably take us or make us feel as comfortable as we would like, but let's just talk about this formula. So the general rule of thumb is to take your annual expenses and multiply that number by 25. So for us, we are projecting that our annual expenses will be pretty much the same as what they are now. So we're projecting that we will spend a little bit more like on our lavish months, which we sometimes live throughout the years. So when we're living a little lavishly, we are spending about $4,000 per month. So if you multiply $4,000 per month by 12, because there are 12 months in a year, then you get $48,000. And then if you multiply $48,000 by 25, then you get $1.2 million. So like I said, that formula is also pretty similar to the other general rule, which is $1 million. So they both are pretty much around the $1 million mark, which I would say is pretty accurate in what we would need to live off of if we did retire at 40 something, 50 years old. So 1 million to 1.2 million or so is what we are likely going to have, and what we're for sure going to need, at least at the bare minimum, to retire when we are looking to retire. The goal would be to have more, of course, but we feel confidently that we could safely, kind of maneuver and do this thing and ride this thing out until the end if we have somewhere near $1 million. But let's talk about some things that we have to take into consideration and just our own personal situation that we have going on and things that we're thinking about as we are thinking about an early retirement. So one thing that we have to take into consideration, which is something that we've kind of already taken into consideration, but leads us into thinking about something else, is not necessarily what our FI number is going to be, or even when our possible retirement age is going to be. But one thing that we have to take into consideration is our death age. Obviously, we don't really know when that will be. If we happen to live longer, then that could be, you know, a little bit of an issue, because we could potentially run out of money or something like that, which God forbid that takes place. But I think everybody runs that same risk, you know, as they get older and they're not working and they're living on, you know, maybe a limited income or a fixed income. So really everybody kind of runs that risk unless they are super wealthy. So that isn't a huge thing to think about, but it is something to consider. Obviously we can't really predict that. Maybe somewhere beyond 80, I would assume, but again, we don't really take that into consideration a whole lot, only because most people don't know when their last day is going to be here on earth, and nobody knows, nobody can really predict that. So therefore it's not really something that we are heavily, you know, like really trying to take into consideration or heavily concerned about. But it does matter, because if we are going to be trying to retire earlier, then that is something to take into consideration. So if you're trying to retire at 65 with 1 million to have for the rest of your life, that's much different than retiring at 40 and with 1 million and trying to make that stretch for the rest of your life. Again, not something that we really are having, not something that I really stress about, because obviously we don't know, but definitely something that makes you think. The next thing to take into consideration is, of course, our lifestyle. Not only our current lifestyle, but what our future lifestyle will be. I am anticipating that our future lifestyle will be pretty similar to what it is now. I don't see us, you know, doing far more traveling than what we're doing right now. I don't see us living some grand, lavish lifestyle, only because that's just not what we are doing now. So I don't see us doing that in the future. And honestly, if I got to retire early at like 40, 45, even 50, and I was restricted to, you know, a $5,000 monthly budget, $4,000 monthly budget, then I would 100% be sure to make that work, because that is already a luxury in and of itself. So I'm not really too concerned about that, but that is something to take into consideration. And like I mentioned, I predict that our spending habits will be, our lifestyle will be roughly the same. The next thing that we are taking into consideration is if we're going to actually still bring in an income, even though we are retired. And I would probably guess that that would be correct. The reason why this really matters is because if we are going to be bringing in an income, then that really drastically changes our circumstances. Let's say I'm still doing YouTube in 10 years, or have some other type of side hustle or something like that. Then if we're still working, we'll still be bringing in an income, therefore potentially not even needing to touch our retirement money, and not even needing to use any of that, and being able, and just with the plan of relying on that later on down the line. So that's just something to think about if you're like tapping out whenever you retire, or if you may have, you know, some side hustle or part-time job or something like that. We are anticipating that we actually will. So if we did retire, like, so if we did have $1 million saved in 10 years, I think it would be safe to say that if we did want to pull the plug and just side hustle a little bit, work a little bit here and there, part-time it up a little bit here and there for the next 10, 15 years or whatever, then we would be safe in doing so. Another thing that we're taking into consideration is kids. As we all know, we want at least one child. I say that with my whole heart, actually. And I know a lot of people sometimes say they want like a big family or a child or whatever the case is. And we always say that we always want at least one child. I would think that I would be grateful even if I could have one child. Again, I've never tried at the filming of this video to have a child. I have no reason to believe that I can't have a child or anything like that. But I would just think that to have one healthy child would be good enough for me, if that makes any sense. And if we had more, that's perfectly fine too. But I'm not going to be, I would be grateful for one child. So as of right now, we're expecting to have at least one child. We are expecting to have that child really, whenever, within the next couple years or whatever that might bring. And the one thing to take into consideration with the child would be, let's say we did retire in 10 years at 40 or somewhere around there. We would obviously have a young child, which would be cool because we could be overly involved in their lives, but that might come, no matter what age they are, it might come with, if they want to do extracurricular activities, or that's going to affect our budget, for more clothes and food and just spending more money just in general. So that's something to take into consideration. And then also, of course, we want to save up for their college if they want to go to college, and just be saving up money for them in some kind of way or in multiple ways to kind of help advance them as they move throughout life and give them an opportunity that we didn't have. So that's also something to take into consideration. I don't take that lightly whatsoever. I plan to help financially as much as I possibly can and kind of meet my child wherever they can meet me. I know, I don't know, I just think about if they're in med school, obviously they're not going to be able to work and provide probably as much as they might be able to if they didn't go to college, or you know what I'm saying. So circumstances may be different, but I fully intend to help however I can help. We intend to help how we can help. So that's just something to take into consideration. If you don't plan to help your kids with college or financially or whatever, then that might not even matter to you, but that's something that's important to us. So something that we have to take into consideration is that some of our money will be going towards our child or children. Another thing that we have to take into consideration is also our other dependents or other dependent, which could potentially be pets. We obviously have a dog now. If we retired in 10 years, honestly, I don't really know if she'll even still be around, so we may not have her, but maybe we'll have another pet. So just taking into consideration other pets and what that might bring as far as, each month we pay for her to, her insurance, her wellness plan. We pay for food and treats and toys and stuff like that. So we do spend a decent amount, nothing too major, on our current dog. So that's just something to take into consideration because it could be a future expense. And just because we have one dog or animal now may not mean that we will have just one in the future. Something else that we have thought about is, savings, and if we would continue to save money in any type of capacity, cash money. Also, not only that, but really just how much money we would have and what might be comfortable for us. Again, it could be helpful for us to have a decent amount saved in cash so that we don't have to touch our investments if anything did go, if there was something unusual to happen, some type of anything that would maybe cause us to have to kind of have more money than what we are withdrawing via investing. So that's just something that we have been thinking about, and just something that is, I guess, provoking thought. Also, non-mortgage debt is something that we have been thinking about. As it stands, as of right now, we would have no debt at all by the time that we would retire. So that's something that we're thinking about, and kind of thinking about how much more money we would have each month in order to, do certain things with, if we don't have a car payment, our student loans will hopefully be gone by then. We're hoping for those to all be gone in the next 2-3 years. So that's just something to take into consideration. And in doing so, really just thinking about how if we could remain non-mortgage debt free, then we would have that much more money, that much more disposable income each month. In addition, we have mortgage debt. If we refinance and if we get a 10-year mortgage and we can get that paid off in the next 10 years before we would retire, then that would open up even more doors, because then we wouldn't even have a mortgage and we would have a fully paid off home with no monthly payment. So that would be super helpful in our future endeavors. And finally, the last thing to take into consideration, which I also kind of touched on earlier, is withdrawal. Like I mentioned before, I think I mentioned this before, but a lot of experts say that withdrawing at an annual rate of about 4% is typically safe and just a good general rule of thumb. So that's something to take into consideration. Obviously, we would want to try to do 4% or somewhere around there, and not, taking out more than what we actually need to be taken out, just because just because, but trying to stick to that and structuring our lifestyle around what a 4% annual withdrawal rate would look like for us in our specific financial situation. So those are just some things that we discussed with our financial advisor, some things that we have taken into consideration, just things that we are thinking about as we enter into retirement, like as we prepare to enter into retirement or prepare to make retirement and early retirement happen. Not things that are, like I said, super pressing, but just things to take into consideration and to be mindful of, because potentially if we can have our ducks in a row and to have taken these things into consideration and taken heed to these things, we may be able to retire with far less stress than what we would if we hadn't taken these things into consideration. So they're just things to think about. I think the most important thing here is to make sure that we are investing more, that we are 100% non-mortgage debt free at retirement, and then hopefully mortgage debt free at retirement too. So just making sure we have no debt, that I think will put us in a great position. So you guys, that is it for today's video. Let me know down in the comment section what your thoughts are. Do you know your financial independence number? When do you want to retire? Are you on track to retirement? What is that looking like for you? It's something that's really important to us. It always has been. So I fully intend to speak more about it as we move until I can't anymore, because honestly I could wake up in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. and talk about finances, money, budgeting, saving, investing. I am trained to go. We call that TTG. I'm ready to go at any moment. But that is it for today's video. This is just something that has, kind of recently come up and something that I wanted to share. And I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and I will catch you in my next one. Bye guys.